Are we ready to get started? Or are we still waiting on one?
No, we have everyone who's going to be here this evening, so we're ready to get started.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, hello, I'm Joy Coleman, and I'm the chair of the Historic Resources Commission, and it is the third Thursday, so we're going to call this meeting to order. Avery, I think that is you there. Yes, would you like to give some meeting instructions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And good evening, everyone. Just a few updated notes before we get started. Please silence your cell phones to minimize distractions during the meeting. When the chair calls for public comment, please approach the podium to indicate you wish to speak. Virtual participants should use the raise your hand function to indicate they wish to speak during public comment. Once your name is called, please unmute and turn on your camera to provide your comments. The primary format for accessing or participating in this meeting is in person at City Hall. Virtual access to view or participate in the meeting cannot be guaranteed. The chat function will not be monitored. And if you have any trouble, the meeting can be viewed on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. And with that, I'll turn the meeting back over to the chair.
Thank you, Avery. Now we'll take a roll call of commissioners. Commissioner Klein.
Commissioner Klein here.
Commissioner Buchanan.
Present.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Commissioner Cunningham present.
And Joy, me, that makes 4, so we have a quorum, so we can have this meeting. That's great. So we'll get into it with item A. Have we received any communications from other commissions, State Historic Preservation Officer, or the general public?
You did receive a letter from the Lawrence Preservation Alliance that was included in an update to your packet. That letter is requesting that the Historic Resources Commission look at requesting a budget line in the Planning and Development Services budget to provide money for surveys so we can do historic resources surveys of the areas in town that have not been surveyed. So I believe someone from LPA is here tonight if you have any questions about that correspondence.
Okay. I don't think I have any questions about the correspondence.
I have a question, but I think Mr. Delaney would like to speak.
Oh, great. Thank you for being my eyes.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. I won't take but a minute. As we've mentioned before, and I know as the HRC has discussed among themselves, the key, it seems to me, to ensuring that the historic resources in the city are preserved, identified, and then preserved in a timely fashion, perhaps before the full impact of the new LDC is revealed, is to get the rest of the city that hasn't been surveyed, starting with the oldest neighborhoods first. And I know a subcommittee of the HRC has been looking at that, and I think has prioritized a variety of neighborhoods. What we have suggested, what LPA has suggested in the letter that we sent, is that we're willing to help put some of LPA's resources into that effort as well. We understand that the city is going to be facing a tough budget cycle. The amount of money that it takes to do these surveys is a rounding error in some other departments' budgets. It's not all that much, but LPA is willing to provide a $1 LPA dollar for every 3 city dollar matches, up to a maximum of $3,000 a year, which would provide enough money to do a survey of the kind that is ongoing now or will be in University Place. And if the city were to do that over a period of 3 years, we could revisit whether or not it makes sense to continue the collaboration, or perhaps to increase the input from LPA's part down the road. But the objective here is to make it clear to the City Commission as I know it's already clear to you, that this is something important that the city ought to do, and that there are folks in the community willing to help put their own resources behind the city's commitment to get this work done. So that's the point of the letter. I hope you'll take us up on our suggestion that you actually ask the City Commission to do this. It clearly falls within your prerogative to testify to the city about things that concern the mission of the HRC. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I do have one question before you sit down. Have you also approached anybody from the budget committee?
I have not. Lynn and I had a brief discussion about this. I had hoped to get a draft letter done in the press of things. It didn't get done until a day or two before, actually long enough for me to get it cleared by our board. I think that's the next thing on the agenda, and we did send copies of this to all of the city commissioners.
Okay.
So they're aware that at least this idea is floating. Oh, they will be when they read their packet.
I thank you for your letter, and it was really well stated. And I thought it might also behoove you to be proactive in approaching, if public can even do that. I don't know what the process is for that budget committee that's been assembled, but I think that would be another good touch point for you to hit.
We'll do that. Yes, ma'am.
I've wondered if you've ever thought about creating a foundation so that community members could donate as a nonprofit, and if so, what's going on with that? If not, why not?
We've had some brief discussions about that. The LPA's board is looking at our resources and trying to figure out what we have to spend on an ongoing basis, and also what we could do to develop funds to do this sort of work. I mean, targeted funds that people would know we're going to go to this, whether whether it was to build sort of a foundation that we could use on an ongoing basis, or just pass through the funds to projects like this. We're fairly far down that road, and I suspect that we'll have a better handle on where we're going to go with that by the time we get to our June meeting. But that's where we are for the moment, and we can clearly, this won't tax. This offer certainly isn't going to push us to the brink. We're going to be okay with this, and the real issue now is to determine what more can we do. I don't, apart from the idea of assembling, a fund, the proceeds of which could be used to fund these things. Mm-hmm. The income that we make on a regular basis, I think it's the general sense of our board that we ought to be using that to fund current projects, that we shouldn't be building up a surplus of operating funds, that we ought to use that to operate and use that to help with our mission. But the idea of trying to target people that would be interested in helping either to fund a fund to do this, or to fund projects and help to coordinate that is on the top of our agenda.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, are you ready for a motion? Sorry.
I don't know that we're ready for a motion, because I have a question for Lynn. Last month, we talked about the priority of the survey areas, and we got that nailed down. Did we need to send a letter, or does the committee send a letter to the City Commission with that information?
No, it's not necessary for the committee to send a letter to the City Commission. That's kind of like your work plan, and they do review your minutes, and so they'll see that reflected in the meeting minutes. And probably with this request, you would want to direct staff to have conversations with the planning director, how to achieve this, whether or not it should be in the planning and development services budget, or whether it actually needs to come from an outside source as a request to the city. So we certainly, with this letter, can do that research and report back to you next month.
Okay, and are we currently in application for HPF grants for surveys?
The grants, I do not believe, have opened yet.
Okay. All right, so since this letter has been, it's in alignment with what we've been doing with the surveys, and it's gone to the city commission members, I'm not sure what were to do next. If we had a motion, what would that motion, like what do we need to vote on here?
Well, to urge the Lawrence City Commission to include funding in next year's budget.
Well, but I think what Lynn just said is it needs to be discussed first, whether it needs to be in the planning department budget or as a separate entity or fund. So I think that needs to be decided first prior to asking the city commission to allocate or to make their motions.
One thing you
Right,
could
what's the
do,
process?
you could take a vote and a motion to accept LPA's letter and support the foundation of the letter and direct staff to work with LPA and the Director of Planning and Development Services to figure out a way to try to achieve this in next year's budget.
I believe there's someone else, Madam Chair, who would like to speak.
Okay, who is that?
Hi, my name's KT Walsh, 732 Rhode Island, and I just want to thank the LPA for putting their money where their mouth is. This is awesome. And it makes it so much easier to get grants if you know somebody's already showing up with their wallet. So my question for you, Lynn, is how much does a survey cost? What's the neighborhood of dollars?
It depends on the size of
Sure.
the survey and how many structures are in the survey. Sometimes it's not, you can't really break it down per building because there are some economies of scale, so you may be able to do 7 buildings as cheaply as you could do 2, or, something like that. So it really depends on how many structures, has there been any work done survey-wise, and has there been any accumulated research history-wise on the history of that area. So all those things factor in to how much the survey will cost.
So the easiest survey where a lot has been done already would come in at 10,000 or?
Well, like the one, and it's in the letter from LPA, we submitted for an $18,000 grant from the State Historic Preservation Office to do the University Place survey. The total project cost is $30,000. But I believe the actual consultant fee is the $18,000. And then the rest of that is staff time and LPA match with their time to help the consultant with all the public meetings and all the mailings and all of those things that go into it, and the grant tracking and things of that nature.
Thanks. I just needed to know what kind of money we need to go find. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for all that information. That makes it clear to me. Commissioner Klein, did you want to make that motion?
Yes, I will move that we accept the letter from LPA and direct staff to discuss the possibility of including funds for State Historical Preservation Fund grants in the city budget next year to survey the city's historic resources.
And work with LPA.
And work with LPA and talk with all the powers that be.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Klein and Commissioner Buchanan. Well, I can't say that. We need to take a roll call vote. Commissioner Cunningham,
Aye.
Commissioner Klein,
Commissioner Klein, aye?
Commissioner Buchanan,
Aye.
and Chair Coleman is an aye, so that motion passes 4-0. Thank you for helping us through that, helping me through that. Okay, so next item, category A, is item number 2, disclosure of ex parte communications. Does any commissioner have any to disclose?
Commissioner Klein, I had a brief meeting with a few people.
Commissioner Klein, you would need to extend to the rest of the commission and the public what that meeting was about and what was discussed.
It was about getting more information about the Dowdell and Rice markers, an update on where we're at with that.
Okay, so it's not an item on the agenda this evening.
Right, but,
Okay.
you know, it's a question I've been asking for the past several HRC meetings, trying to get information about where we're at.
Okay.
I do have an ex parte for an agenda item that we are hearing tonight on 700 New Hampshire. Over months, I've had 3 separate people contact me asking me about row houses and the likelihood of the project going through. At the time, I had not seen any of the designs. I didn't know much about the project, so there wasn't much to discuss, but I felt like I should still say something tonight because I was asked questions. I just didn't have answers at the time, so.
Great. I also had a conversation about the same project that Commissioner Buchanan referenced, and it was simply to Paul Werner let me know that he would not be at the meeting today. And I had not seen the design either at that point, so I said, okay. Then item number 3, declaration of abstentions for specific agenda items from any commissioners? No? Okay. And committee reports. Do we have any committee reports today?
We do not have any committee reports today.
All right, perfect. Next is the consent agenda. We are considering meeting minutes from February's meeting and the design review applications that have been reviewed by staff. I'll entertain a motion.
Commissioner Klein, I move that we accept the Historic Resources Commission minutes for February 20, 2025.
I had a question, but that's okay. I guess, second.
Do you have a question?
Well, you can ask a question. We can-
On 708 Mississippi, it was the dormers being replaced by skylights?
I'm only doing the minutes.
Oh, I thought you said the entire consent
No,
agenda.
I thought we needed 2 separate motions, so I was just moving to approve the minutes
can.
for February 20.
Then
You
second.
can do 2 motions, but you can also do 1 for the consent agenda.
Okay, minutes. I'll stick with minutes.
All right, then I'll stick with my second.
Wonderful. We'll take a vote. Commissioner Cunningham?
Aye.
Commissioner Klein?
Commissioner Klein, aye?
Commissioner Buchanan?
Aye.
Chair Coleman is aye, so that passes 4-0.
And I could do a second motion if you like.
Yes.
I think
Well,
question.
I
Good
have a question as well.
Oh, on the
Oh,
minutes?
you too. Okay.
Oh,
So in 708 Mississippi, there was a dormer, request to replace dormers with skylights. I don't know if you remember that project. And I do completely agree that it does meet the standards, but I was just kind of questioning the roof line, replacing a dormer with a skylight, just in general. That seems to be not recommended.
Well,
Because it would change the,
this is a certificate of approval.
right.
And so when you look at the standards in, the guideline in 22507 and then the design criteria in 22508.
Right.
Even with the removal of that dormer and the skylights, the roof is of the same character as
Okay.
the rest of the context area.
Okay.
So it doesn't go to something that, a princess tower would not be appropriate, but they just took a dormer off and put on skylights, and it's still a pitched roof, which is common in the context area.
Okay, I think that's the part that wasn't clear. It looked like it was getting rid of the dormer altogether, but okay, then, perfect, thank you.
And Commissioner Cunningham, I have a question as well for the city. I'm just confused as to why there are two applications for 1246 Haskell Avenue and the difference between the two applications.
The way Chapter 22 is written, the Historic Resources Commission has to review site plans, and the Historic Resources Commission has to review building permits. The COM-24 1246 Haskell is the building permit, and the SP-24 is the site plan through the planning department.
Okay.
So they're two separate reviews.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
I move that we approve the design review applications.
Commissioner Klein, seconds?
Thank you. We'll take a vote now. Commissioner Cunningham?
Aye.
Commissioner Klein?
Commissioner Klein, aye.
Commissioner Buchanan?
Aye.
And Chair Coleman is an aye. So that motion passes 4-0. Moving on to public comment. Now is the time, if you have comment about any item that is not on the agenda tonight, you may step forward and state your name and make your comment. Is there any?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you for that. Moving on to public hearing items. Number 1 is HRC 250003.
Good evening, Commissioners. Lynn Braddock-Zollner, Historic Resources Administrator. This is a new construction project. The address is 700 New Hampshire Street, but it's actually all the way to the east on that property. So it is closer to Rhode Island Street than it is to New Hampshire Street, but it does have that New Hampshire Street address. The property is located in the context area of the McAllister House at 724 Rhode Island Street, which is directly across the street from the end of this project, from the south end. And then the property is also located in the Downtown Urban Conservation Overlay District. This map shows the property here outlined in this light blue color. 724, the McAllister House, is right here in the bright blue, and the context area does cover the majority of the area where the structure will be. In previous projects, we've also looked at this being in this property being in the context area of the Griffin House at 645 Connecticut Street, but with the new determination in Chapter 22 with the definition of the context area, it just clips this corner without structure, so it's not considered part of the context of the Griffin House at 645 Connecticut Street. This is the project location. It's here in this vacant parking lot that you see right here. You have mentioned, I think, in some of your correspondence that about the stable wall, and the stable wall is still here where the cursor is on the right-hand side of your screen. It is in very poor condition and certainly needs some attention. This is from Google Street View, standing in 7th Street, looking down Rhode Island Street. The subject property is on the right behind the wooden fence. The new construction will come up in some places all the way to the sidewalk. Also from Google Street View, just showing you what the houses and structures across the street from the proposed project look like. Most of them have pitched roofs, and then all the way in the right is the McAllister house. And there it is, because I love this house. This is the site plan for the proposed project. If you noticed in your staff report, staff included Sanborn fire insurance maps to show that historically this side of Rhode Island Street did develop with single dwelling residential structures. I did not pinpoint the date when all of those were taken down. It seems like it kind of worked like attrition over time, but it did historically have a residential use on this side of this block. So the Borders building would stay where it is, and the parking lot would be reconfigured to have parking here. What was once the alleyway will stay and will not be blocked, and then the townhomes will be built adjacent to the sidewalk along Rhode Island Street. And if you notice down here, you do have a little bit of separation from the sidewalk to the porch of the building, but as you get down, because of the changing grade, the steps to actually get you up to the porch will go all the way to the sidewalk. With the building that is this long, it's hard to get the graphic on the screen, so you may want to look at the drawings in your packet instead. But this is the east elevation of the structure. It is broken up. The mass is broken up by dividing the visual into the actual units that will be the row houses. So you can see here that there is some differentiation between the different sections of the building. All of the row houses have a front porch with a pedestrian door that face Rhode Island Street. They all have at least one balcony on the east elevation. Some of them, like this structure, this one here in the middle, have two balconies. If you notice the one that's directly adjacent to it, this is a metal roof over the balcony, and then the third floor doesn't have a balcony. So there is some differentiation across the building like that. The materials that they are planning to use include lap siding, which is likely fiber cement, and some metal panels or stucco or EIFS. That was kind of left as a kind of either or situation with the materials. This is showing the west elevation of the structure. As mentioned in the staff report, each unit will have its own garage that is accessed from the parking lot on the 700 New Hampshire Street lot. So that's what these large areas are here. There's also a pedestrian door for each unit on this elevation, and balconies all across the second level. This is showing the north and south elevations of the structure. Staff mentioned in the staff report, these are very utilitarian elevations. Typically, when we look at projects in the context area that are standalone We'd like to see architectural detailing on all 4 elevations if they're all visible from the public right-of-way, which this structure would be. So there is some differentiation in material, but not a lot going on the north and south elevation. The applicant did supply renderings for you to look at because sometimes those line drawings are a little bit hard to get a feel for the individual units and the play with the push-pull and the divisions. And so here, this would be the Rhode Island Street elevation. So you can see that the porch is elevated a little bit, like the context review says is a good thing. There's a door. The windows are a little unique in that they're not typical for the context area, but they are, for the most part, with the exception of the little windows that you see in some of the buildings, taller than they are wide, which is one thing we look at for compatibility. The roof line is also broken up to try to break up some of that mass and give indication where the different units are. This rendering shows the west elevation of the structure and also the south end of the structure. It shows you the garage door and then the straight entry for the unit, the second floor balcony, and then just windows on that third floor. As it's noted in your staff report, there are a lot of good things about this project. Infill is always good when you have a large parking lot like this to see housing come back. Everybody knows we have a little bit of a housing shortage in Lawrence. So those are good things, and there's some good things about the project, the way the mass has been tried to break it up a little bit. There are, I believe, architectural details and some finesse that can be done with the project to help it better meet those standards and guidelines. And you have in your staff report which guidelines it meets, which guidelines it doesn't meet, and also with the context area. So staff is recommending that you refer this project to the Architectural Review Committee and allow them to work with the applicant on design refinement so that the project can better meet the standards and guidelines for Chapter 22 and the downtown design guidelines. Now I know what you're thinking. We only have one architect on ARC. I have a solution for that. So don't worry about that. We'll talk about that at the end of the meeting, but staff is recommending that you refer this to the ARC. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to stand for those now.
I have a question. Why is the address on New Hampshire?
The way the lot is platted in this parking lot has always been, since the construction of the Borders building, the parking lot has been associated with the Borders building, and that's the address for that lot and building. Okay. So they will likely get we kind of looked at the site plan for this and tried to figure out what that addressing scheme is going to be, and I don't have an answer for you on that.
Okay, if commissioners don't have questions for staff, we could move on to hearing from the applicant, representative, yes, if present.
Sort of. Thanks, Lynn. I'm Tiffany Asher with Paul Werner Architects. Like the chairwoman said, Paul is not here. I do have Jeff McBee on Zoom with me, who has worked with Paul on this project, so he may be able to answer questions that I cannot. Sorry, I just made these notes listening to you guys. Blah, blah, blah. This property has sat vacant for a long time. We do have a client now who wants to build residential in this lot without any, incentives or rebates from the city. This is also new for us, that we are here for new construction without asking for demolition. That's always nice. And like you said, being in the downtown area, plus in the context area, I did look over the staff report. I was thinking maybe in the future for things that don't apply, we could use a different color than red. Because I was like, what is all this red? Oh, it doesn't apply. So I was like, maybe, just a side note. I do know that Paul and our client met with neighboring property owners this last Saturday to hear any concerns or feedback that they have. And I think with comments from the commission and comments from the neighbors, I think that we agreed to go to the ARC and kind of refine some stuff like Lynn stated. I think, it's really hard to tell like where the front door is. I think things like that, breaking it up, some of the materials, I think we could work with the ARC to, hopefully get a project that makes a majority of people happy, because we're never going to make everyone happy. But I would be happy to answer the questions that I know, and Jeff will, and if we need to respond to any public comment, if necessary, we can do that as well. So.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Yes, Commissioner Klein?
So the Donnelly Wall of borders. First of all, I did check some history and found out that the Donnellys were there since 1871. So my question to you is, during the construction, is there any risk of the wall falling down or being unsettled and causing a fall?
That is not the plan. The plan is to not touch borders at all.
Yeah, I just don't know the engineering, the ground shaking. I'm imagining.
Oh.
I'm just asking if it's a threat or not.
I'm going to go with the no. I mean, we have the developer. He is a general contractor. He is also on the call. But I think we are far enough away from that.
It looks like Adam.
Yes.
Wants to.
Adam.
Go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
There is no fear on our end from that wall collapsing. I will say, like Lynn did, it is in poor repair. And part of this project of putting up these row houses is to put us in a financial position where we can take care of the borders building and including that wall here in the near future. So this project is phase one of a multi-phase project. And the goal is to get this project complete, have it be successful to where we have the funds and capability to address the borders building in whatever way it comes at us. We don't know exactly how that's going to get redeveloped yet, but we know that without this project, it could sit for a long time. Just because, people have looked at it for office and they looked at it for grocery store, and we've talked about putting a 7-story building up in that parking lot, and a lot of things have been discussed. And this is the first time that I feel like I've seen a clear path forward to how to redevelop this blighted site, including that wall. It does need retuck pointed and plastered and painted and get rid of the graffiti, and all kinds of things need to happen. So that's a long way to say no. We don't anticipate it falling down. But we certainly want to get the funds in place to where we can improve it or repair it.
Would you be able to put vibration monitors on the walls so as construction digging happens, you would know if any vibrations were happening?
To be honest, Joy, I don't even know what that is, but so I've never had to do that before, but I suppose if it's available, we can look into it.
Yeah, and also there's no basements or underground parking or anything, so that helps.
Yeah, just foundations then.
Yeah.
Commissioner Klein?
I'm done for now.
Oh, okay. All right. Any other questions from commissioners?
Well,
The applicant?
I'm curious to know what comments you heard from the neighbors, or what Paul and when you heard from the neighbors in general.
Yeah, so Paul and I both went to that meeting, and I took away a few bullet points, and I'm not going to get them all, so I apologize to those people that I'm leaving out. But things that Paul and I considered when we were designing this building were brought up in that meeting, which makes me a little more confident that we did the right thing in how we designed this structure. One of the things that we knew would be an issue is how tall it's going to be. And so, you know, you want it to look like the neighborhood next door, but again, you don't, right? Because you have this historic neighborhood next door, and we don't want to look exactly like it. We want to help where we can. So we thought, you know, should it have a gable roof on it? Should it have a pitched roof on every one of these? Well, another concern we knew would come up is they're too tall. So when you put a gable roof on top of those, you go up another 6 to 8 feet. And, you know, we're right at 30 feet tall now. And the Borders building, for example, is 28 feet tall with their parapet wall. And so we didn't want to go up to 38 or 40 feet. So we considered that. We said, you know what, let's keep it a flat roof. Let's get this thing as low as possible and still get the density we need. So height was a consideration. And also a concern at the meeting. Another concern at the meeting, and probably, I know KT's there with us today and has better notes than me, but part of the biggest concern was parking. You know, they're getting run over there with, no pun intended, with parking, you know, whether it's the downtown people looking for spots or the farmer's market or the apartments at Pachamama's that don't have parking. I mean, to add more to that was a huge concern. And again, when Paul and I went to design this building, we said, you know what? Every one of them is going to have a parking garage for one car. And every one of them that has 2 cars are going to be allowed to park in the Borders parking lot. That way it keeps the majority of the parking off of their street. So, you know, parking was a huge concern. And I feel like we were very good stewards in addressing a problem that they already face. And so I think we accomplished that. Another concern in the meeting was, you know, how far does it set back from the street? And so we did the minimum setback from the street, and there's a reason why we did that. If we go back further away from the street, the property line, than what is currently there, it impacts how much parking we have in the Borders parking lot. You have to have a certain amount of driveway width, parking width, and driveway width in the Borders building to maximize your parking. If we were to push the building back, you start eliminating 10, 20 parking spots that we really need in that area to help relieve some of that pressure on Rhode Island. Another consideration is we don't know what's going to happen with the Borders building yet. You know, we think we have some uses in mind that don't require a lot of parking, but there's a lot of uses out there that require many parking spots. So the more parking we can keep in that site, the better off everybody is, especially those folks on Rhode Island or in that neighborhood. There were some other comments about, you know, how does the HOA operate? My answer to that is the HOA is going to operate just like everybody operates their homes in Rhode Island. You know, these are going to be owner-occupied units that, in my opinion, you know, at the price point we are, those folks aren't going to want rentals next door. They're not going to want short-term or, you know, apartment house style stuff. They're going to want long-term neighbors that respect each other and want to keep their property in order. And, you know, the HOA is going to cover the exterior of the building in whole. It's going to cover the roof. It's going to cover the landscaping. It's going to cover the parking. It's going to cover all those necessary things to make sure that this structure stays in good order. Another important thing is when it comes back to access is all these units, all the parking, all that stuff comes from the border side or the western side of the building. You know, you're not having cars driving into a garage off of Rhode Island. So that was another big consideration we thought about when we designed this structure. So I feel like we did a good job. You know, first and foremost, everything on our mind was that neighborhood when we did this. And I think like Lynn said before too, you know, this thing's been talked about in a lot of different ways. And you guys have looked at it probably a dozen times, or I don't know how many, but it's been a lot. So, but we think this one is it's a down zoning, it's a down use, right? It's not a commercial use. It's back to the residential use that it always has been, and we feel like it's a good fit, and we hope to get your support.
Yeah. And to add on to what Adam said about the height, putting a garage in there is taking a lot of space, and so you need that extra level to to get the living area.
Okay, thank you for that comment on the design and the reasoning. Now I believe it's time to take public comment. If we have any public comment on this item.
I have a question. You can hear me?
Oh,
Go, Tim.
Tim, if you want to go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry, Patoni. Go ahead. I didn't see you.
You're on the screen. Go ahead.
Oh, wow. Happy for everyone. My name's Tim Nauman. I'm at 714 Rhode Island Street, so really directly across from it. And I love Lawrence and I love downtown. I've lived within 3 blocks of this house for 30 years, and I've been here for 23. So I love that everyone here's, there's growth. My major concern as being the person who's going to look at this building is, and I'm a photographer by trade, so I could even shoot some things and put some scale to it. That close to that sidewalk at that height is going to be a big wall for us. And it's a personal thing. I just think it's going to feel imposing. When I was here when Borders was being built, I was here when Hobbs Taylor was being built, and their location more towards New Hampshire and that parking lot space really does make a visual buffer that I think speaks to a lot of things. So I guess I would just want to put out there and put my thought out there that I think the height of it, I know parking's a concern, and I think it's really cool that they did put in the indoor parking, and I think Adam made a great explanation of leaving the parking, putting it so close to the sidewalk that you had parking, but it's kind of like, this is the little conundrum, right? We solve one problem to kind of create another, right? If the building was set back like our houses are, another 15, 20 feet from the sidewalk, then I think that building becomes way less imposing to the neighborhood, right? But then that doesn't solve the problem with the parking. So, I think we can all look at this, or I can look at it from both sides and see what a challenge that might be. But again, I'm purely coming from, I live next door. So, and I appreciate you all listening to me on that. I also feel as though I've had several times that I've wanted to update or add on to my home, and I have heard over and over and over about how strict the commission is on, I can't come in and change the face of my house is built in 1890. It's one of the 3 Bowersock rental homes. I'm in the middle of those. And I've kind of embraced that after 4 years, right? And I work hard, and my neighbors do too, to keep things going. And I guess I just feel like this design has I just don't feel like it's going to immerse itself in the environment at all. Again, purely my opinion on it. I don't know enough about how this works. I just wanted to say that those are my concerns about it. I'm also, the third concern that I have is that at the price that they're going for, I feel like there's going to be a lot of Kansas City and Chicago parents buying these units to be here for their children, and they're going to be Airbnb. So they can have a place to stay. They're going to Airbnb these. I know this is what's happening at the ones that are above Pachamamas, because I know 2 people who are doing it. That's just a bit of concern to me as well. So, and for that, I appreciate your guys' time listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a gentleman at the podium?
Lou, on the phone.
Tony Peterson, 724 Rhode Island. I own the McAllister house, and Tim expressed a lot of the same concerns I have. It's the mass, the scale, the overwhelming scale about how, and it doesn't fit in with the scale of the street or the neighborhood. And I don't care if you put in little parapets or something like that. It's just too big. I've lived in my house for 32 years, and this might be the point where I say, I'm done. If this goes in, I'm ready to sell and get the hell out of here. That's how much I'm opposed to this. I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional.
KT Welsh, 732 Rhode Island. I'm not directly across the street, I'm down the block. And I wanted to just remind everybody, when we first met with Bo Harris, the developer, when he was talking about doing the Hobbs Taylor lofts, they were going to be right on the eastern side, right up in our faces. And he moved it back, and it works. Everybody didn't lose their sunlight, and we didn't have the canyon effect. So I, too, have problems with the mass and the scale, especially as it concerns the McAllister house, which survived Quantrill's raid. I mean, this is a super important property. Also, I want to say, I'm glad that they paid attention to parking. It is a big issue, but I don't think we need to look to them to solve our parking. I think we need to work on that as a city and a neighborhood. It's more important to get this structure right than worry about parking spaces. And so in my mind, I would hope that the Architectural Review Committee would think about pushing it back. And they said they'd lose parking spaces. I think, that's something the ARC has to weigh. I, too, feel like there's nothing going on the north and south walls, and I think that could be helped. I'm a muralist. I say do murals, but hey. I also feel like there needs to be architectural references to the design of the homes right across the street. I don't see any references, and we don't want the Disneyland, fake references, and we don't need a gabled roof, but we do need a reference because this is so modern and we're not across the street. Also, the current design will not just be 30 feet, it'll be 34 feet because of the rise in the land. It goes up over there. And so that's what you're looking at across from two-story homes. Somebody at the meeting suggested that the first floor could be a basement, and that would make it still 3 stories, but one would be underground. And I don't know what that would do to the cost, probably a lot, but it's an idea. I'm concerned that there's not a single walkthrough, that this is so monolithic. And I think because of, we got the stairways all to be saved when the Hobbs Taylor went in, they were going to block us off. And we said, no, this is walking patterns. This has to be walkable. And I really wish there was just one walkthrough. It doesn't mean there has to be not a shared wall, but shared wall and then a walkthrough for the public so we can, walk places. Let's see. The Donnelly livery wall is in terrible shape. Every time I go by it, things are falling off every day more and more. And so I am concerned. And you can go look at the vibration monitors that are on the south side of the Watkins Museum. And that would be really helpful. During our meeting, the neighbors' meetings with Adam and Paul Werner, his architect, they kept referring to a 7-story building that was proposed for this end of the block at one time. That was talked about. That was never going to happen, and the Hobbs Taylor people would sue. There would be such an uproar. I just think they need to stop using that example, because people say, well, it's not a drive-through fast food, it's not a 7-story building. That's irrelevant. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
Doesn't look like it.
It does not look like there's any more public comment in person or on Zoom.
Okay. Well, I am, as always, very willing to review this in the Architectural Review Committee. I am excited for you all to hear what Lynn's solution is for that coming up.
I would like to express concern with sending it to the Architectural Review Committee. And I would like to echo what we heard in public comment and also some of the letters that were attached to the application. I think that this project as proposed would need significant changes for it to kind of appease the neighbors and also like fit within the design guidelines. I don't know if an architectural review committee would be enough.
I would second that feeling. Because I'm very, very concerned about, again, the height, the size, how massive it is, how modern looking it is, with very few, if any, references to the neighborhood. Again, I can't design, but, as someone suggested, have the first floor in the basement and 2 stories as opposed to 3. I'm thinking of duplexes, like 2 separate duplexes with space in between each duplex. I know that developers want developers want to make as much money from people as possible, so they want to pack as many people into one monolithic building as possible to make the most profit. But I think this is a case where it's so on top of Rhode Island, it's right there, it's within the downtown boundaries, and again, I'm concerned about the Donnelly Wall, falling down completely from whatever vibrations, I don't know, but yeah, I'm with you. I just think it needs to be much shorter, and with the walkways, whether it's 1 walkway or 5 or 4 walkways or something, it's so long, it's so massive, and I just want to make sure that the Rhode Island neighbors stay where they are. And bless you for taking care of the McAllister house and all the other historic houses on that row, because they're really, really important homes. So I'm with you, Phil.
Well, yeah, I hear you, and I feel like this is a transition zone. I don't know if that's actually in the design guidelines, but it's, I don't recall. But it's a spot that is, historically a residential zoned and used place. And it was single-family homes until those were removed. And then now it's parking. And I don't think we should encourage, unless, we should allow, but not encourage strongly by closing our minds to real infill housing that's going to fulfill a need that we have, by saying it has to be like it was historically, because you can't rebuild the past. And then you also don't want it to be the same as what we have on New Hampshire Street, because that is, closer to Massachusetts, should be that, retail feel and larger monolithic structures. And then the idea is you step down to the neighborhood. So yes, that I hear all that and agree with a lot of it. I do think that we are charged to protect the historic resources and protect those patterns of development, but we should not obstruct good, decisions that or proposals that are made that do not exactly match what we have in the historic resources.
And just a comment from staff about the Architectural Review Committee, and I'll go ahead and throw in my idea here that I was saving for later. In the past, when we've only had one architect on the HRC, we have asked the previous architect who stepped off the HRC to serve in a limited capacity for the conclusion of that project, not a long-term appointment, but just for that project. And I did reach out to Jay Hawley, and he is willing to, if the commission would appoint him for this project and potentially the next project, if that's the way it goes, to serve on the Architectural Review Committee. I will say, I know this commission hasn't seen a lot of the things that the ARC has accomplished over the years, and there have been some designs that were much further away from where this is that came through the ARC that ended up meeting the guidelines.
Yes.
So I think that potential is there for the ARC to work with a willing applicant to help achieve those standards and guidelines. And it will come back to this commission, so if you think it doesn't, then that's when you have the opportunity to say no.
Yeah, so you do get to see it again. Having been on an ARC and HRC previously and been a part of numerous willing participants and non-willing participants, by large, what can be achieved with the ARC, I have faith that this project with Jay Hawley and Joy Coleman working with the applicant can move this project to something that will meet the guidelines. I do think it brings comfort to the HRC that whatever comes back, you get to say yay or nay again. So I do have some statements I'd like to make about row houses in general and this project. I completely hear the concerns. I think we all visually have kind of a, wow, that's really modern, and kind of gasp. I think the changes that can be made, I think programmatically, you guys nailed a lot of things. Row houses are not typical. They don't exist in our current vernacular vocabulary. So introducing a new typology is not recommended, if not downright frowned upon. I think this is the right project in the right location at the right time with the right developer. He's not proposing high-density apartments. You know, we could have a really monolithic, metal-cladded building being proposed. That's not what's being proposed. There are a lot of very good qualities to row houses in that they are supposed to be right up on the sidewalk because they are pedestrian friendly, they're community friendly. They, you look at many different planning principles and strong towns, things like that, and row houses are notorious for supporting very community-minded, community-engaged living facilities. So I think row houses are very appropriate. I think the parking, you guys nailed that, have the flow of traffic, and keeping the pedestrians on that Rhode Island side, I think is going to be enjoyable. I think aesthetically, a lot of the concerns with the, especially with 15.7, the variety and differentiation. I think if you take it a little less modern and kind of new traditional, you know, where it does reflect some of the architectural language that's happening, I think it'll be a good compromise. So I have faith in the ARC and this applicant to come back with something that we all go, okay, I could see that working. And not feel so monolithic. So yeah, I appreciate that it's not super high density, but it's creating a density that's appropriate.
And I'm trying to read the scale on the plans and look at the satellite, image of the property. The proposal is a series of townhomes that extend half the block or 2/3 of the block.
I
Or
believe
the
it's
whole
up to the Donnelly Wall. The south side is,
I think it's how far down Rhode Island?
Yeah, the wall's on the north side. She's talking south.
I know, but I thought it's across from where the Donnelly Wall is. I thought that's what I heard Jeff say.
The Donnelly Wall is on 7th Street.
I understand that, yeah.
Okay, I'm talking about how far does it extend towards 8th?
Going south.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Tony knows.
I can answer that question. The property line for this property lines up with the north property line for my house.
Okay.
So it's
That's-
directly across with one parking spot, and that would be the south end of the entire structure.
Okay.
And what's your address again?
724.
McAllister. So it's the south, the end is at McAllister House.
8, 10, 12.
Commissioner Coleman, if you look at the change over time on the Sanborn Fire Insurance maps on, I believe it's page 7 of 40 and page 8 of 40 and then 9 of 40, it shows outlined in red the west side of Rhode Island Street that would encompass the structure. So that red circle is where the new structure would be. So you can see across the street the platted lots. And if you look, it's a little small, but the addresses are along the Rhode Island Street. So you can see where it is in relationship.
That's what I was trying, on the 1897, that's why I was trying to find the McAllister House.
It's going to be across the street, like it's not.
Right, yeah,
It's not shown.
oh, right. So,
So as far as how.
Oh, got it.
If you take.
Right.
That these are 50-foot lots, and you're doing 25 and 50-foot increments, if you take the red rectangle, so if you go every 25 feet, that would be 12 units. He's proposing 18 units in what would have been 12 individual houses. Which is why they're 18 instead of 25. Correct, Tiffany?
6.
I'm counting 15 that there were.
There's 15.
There's 15 row houses, but if you took 25 feet, instead of them being 18 feet, if they were the 25 feet, you could only fit 12. So that's what I'm saying is, if it was a traditional,
and
so
what's
if you're
wrong with
wondering how
12?
far.
I'm throwing, I'm just asking.
So if she would have included the rest of the block, the other half of Rhode Island was industrial. So I went back to the 1883 Sanborns myself, and it's always been residential on that north half. The south half, right across from McAllister, was industrial.
It was residential.
Do you want to see the map?
It was,
Look at the map.
it was residential.
It was always residential.
It's always been residential.
Not the 1883, and not in 1889, which happened to be left off of this one.
I've looked at the map, it was always residential.
So you're talking about the zoning, not what was there?
Oh,
No, in 1883, there was It was a granary and,
Not on Rhode Island.
I think we're talking different sides of the street, maybe.
no,
No?
it was the west side of Rhode Island.
Well, McAllister's been around for a long, long, long time, so the other houses next to it are roughly, 1890s,
I have piles of research about the house.
I'll bet you do.
Yeah,
It was never industrial on the west side of the street.
so 1883, sheet 3.
You'd have to look.
These are some of the things that are worked through in the ARC meetings.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter for ARC. So be specific about what we want ARC to look at. I think the fenestrations, I think the detailing, creating a more variety in the form, the north and south facade details. Maybe something can happen with the porches, maybe those Oriel windows on the north and south, doesn't really quite meet the modern, but if you start changing some of those details to reflect the historic architecture that's across the street, maybe some of those other ideas like Oriel windows or some sort of bay windows, something to make it more articulated, and change the variety. I think they are very similar. So when you look at the rendering, it's kind of the same thing all the way down. If we could differentiate that more, I think that would be good. I don't know if there's other things that other commissioners are specifically hoping to see.
Well, my idea was rather than us telling the Architectural Review Committee everything, all the ideas, and redesigning it for them as many of us have mentioned and so forth, I would propose a motion that would say, refer the project to the Architectural Review Committee for design improvement to meet all the standards and guidelines.
Well, it has to do that anyway.
Well, but I'm adjusting the wording here. Instead of better meet the standards, I'm saying to meet all the standards and the guidelines, which is all the red in the in staff's report.
In my experience, ARC goes better when they know what the HRC would like to see come back.
Well, I for one want shorter, less mass, more differentiation, as you said, to reference and reflect. And I'm not, and Joy, I don't mean a mirror image of the houses across the street. I'm talking about far more than ticky-tack, same identical design across this monolith with no walkways. It's, again, it's too tall, too massive, too wide, too obstructive, I guess.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And I think that I would be more open to row houses like this or a project like this if it was on New Hampshire, if it was 700 New Hampshire. But I think what we're dealing with is that the parcel has been consolidated under the 700 New Hampshire address, but these are properties that are all, in essence, on Rhode Island and facing Rhode Island. And it may be that this is an issue where the parcel should be divided between the side that faces New Hampshire and the side that faces Rhode Island. I think that there's fundamentally different designs for Rhode Island, which is a residential street, and New Hampshire, which is a commercial street. And I understand that, the restrictions that would prevent, demolishing the old Borders Stumble-In building and doing that, but I'm sure the Architectural Review Committee can make miracles happen, but I think fundamentally, I don't think that row houses are appropriate for this site. And that's why I think that this is something that I would not vote to approve, and that what we would need is like a radically different proposed plan.
And what we've learned is it is better to work through all these things with the applicant if we vote against it and we don't approve it, it's likely going to go to city commission and be built without any oversight.
Great.
I was sorry to interrupt. I didn't hear any public comment closed, so I'll speak. I know the applicant is very willing to work with the ARC. Sorry, I'll go up here and speak. Paul Werner Architects, we've been doing this 30 years. We are more than willing to work with ARC. We have brought many projects before this commission, and I do appreciate Brennan making it clear. The ARC doesn't get to just then decide this is what gets built. It comes back here to this commission, and so it is appreciated when we hear specific feedback, because even if it were to say be denied today, and we were like, okay, we'll go back to the drawing board. I mean, where do we start if we don't really have some specifics? And so if we have specifics and can work with the ARC, it kind of just takes away that need for a whole new submission, which would be the same thing that we would be doing. Just kind of, anyways. So, thank you.
Yes, thank you for that.
And just from a staff perspective, it's important to keep in mind that this property, even though historically it was not constructed all commercial, it is in the downtown commercial district zoning-wise. So land use-wise, they could put up a totally commercial structure here.
Yeah.
So you have to look at the downtown design guidelines and the context area and try to find a way to marry those two things for this property, because although it was historically, before it was a parking lot, single dwellings, it does have downtown zoning, and I believe the height limitation is like 90 feet.
Yes.
Do we know when this parcel was consolidated as one?
I can look.
I thought it was during the Hobbs-Taylor.
No, it was done with borders, I believe. Let me
Okay.
look real quick.
Somewhere in that mix.
Yeah, when they vacated the alley.
I think
Yeah.
that was with borders, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Block, and then it was split up.
That's right.
Well, hearing public comment about the parking not maybe being an issue for the developer to decide, would we want to ask the applicant to look at the location of the building on the site as one of the options to discuss with the ARC?
Yes.
I think we also need to remember this is phase one of a larger concept for that area. And I'm concerned with potential future phases, the need to retain parking. I can make an argument both ways. I think it'll be up to everyone else to decide. I think what the solutions that they've come up with, I think, are very, what's the word?
Reasonable?
Yes, thank you.
The
And
plat,
pushing the envelope. I mean, it is pushing on the envelope of compliance with the standards.
Yeah. But
the plat was in 1996, but I believe the commercial zoning predates that. I would have to do zoning research to make sure.
that sounds right. I do think with some changes to the variety and form of those front porches on Rhode Island, like the front side, what we're all considering the front side, I think will help make it seem less monolithic. It will create more of that differentiated setback. I think we need to give ARC and the applicant a chance to see what they come up with.
I can be amenable to that. We have a comment on, or a question that on through Zoom.
Yes, Mr. Williams.
So I have historically always worked with the HRC when I can, same with the city commission. But right now, as it sits for me, if I want to hear from the commissioners if they're willing to work with me, because if there's two hard no's sitting up there to where, you know, this is just not the project for them, I want to know. You know, I don't want to waste your time, and I certainly don't want to waste mine. And so like I said, historically, I've always worked with both. I pride myself on that, including the neighbors, but you know, I kind of want to know where everybody stands on it. So if you're telling me you're not willing to work with me on this project, I would rather know now.
Well, we're also trying to imagine what the ARC is going to come back with. So I guess my question to you would be, do you have it within your scope of plans to make it a shorter building and a less monolithic building of that looks like that with all the apartments looking the same across the?
It's a great question, and one we've thought about a bunch. You know, you can stand up here and say, I want incentives to do this, and I want incentives to do that. Why do we say that? Because it doesn't financially work. Mm-hmm. Instead, I took the position, I'm going to do a project where I'm not going to ask for any of that. You know, if people want to buy them, great. It's market rate. You know, I'm not going to say, city, you need to subsidize me to do that, or you need to provide parking to do that. I'm not here to do that. And I can make them shorter and, you know, put less in there, but we've got to make up the difference somewhere. And so if I have to go to the city commission and say, you know, I need X amount of dollars to make this project happen, maybe that is the route. I don't think it's the right route, though. And, you know, 2 stories tall, you're eliminating your garage.
Yeah.
You can't put a basement in it because you can't park a car over your basement.
Right.
Or the garage has to come off Rhode Island, and nobody wants that.
Right.
And so, you know, we've thought about, just as you're doing tonight, mm-hmm. we've thought about every avenue that we possibly can, and this is the project that that makes sense for both sides of that lot, New Hampshire side and Rhode Island side, in our opinion. You know, I know that some of the neighbors think differently, and I appreciate that, I do. But that's why, you know, if we come back to you, the density has got to be there to make it work financially. And I know that is not a consideration in this group. I get it, but for us it is. So it's just a blend of everything that we've thought about, and we think this is the best project moving forward.
Would you be able to come down on the number of units in the building at all?
I suppose if there was a walkway that was needed, we could do that. I'm hesitant to say that just because I don't believe it really helps that much, because, you know, if we have stairs that come up the south side of the building and then you can get around the other side on 7th Street, I think that is adequate to get downtown. I don't think a third location going through the middle is necessary. I'm hesitant. Can it be done? Yes. I don't know what the financial impact is tonight.
Yeah. But remember, the zoning allows like up to 90 feet.
Yeah.
So they really have. That's why I think they're close enough that we need to give them the opportunity to work with the ARC and see what they come back with.
Can I ask you as well, you said, and with this being the phase 1 of like a multi-phase development of this property, do you have initial concept of what phase 2 or 3 might look like, what you anticipate might happen on the property as it faces New Hampshire?
We have interested parties, and when I say interested, they've wanted to see the space for office space. Or, without, that use has not come along in the last 10 or 14 years when that building's been vacant. So for them to actually pull the trigger on it, I'd be surprised.
Yeah.
In our opinion, there's a chance that we could redevelop some of that into housing again, to where that whole block is more of a mixed-use housing, maybe some retail, a mix. But to be perfectly honest, we don't have a plan for the Borders building yet, because it's a tough building to figure out without scraping it down and going up. So again, I go back to this. This is the thing that can financially help us figure out what to do with that building.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Say this project goes through and then phase 2 is the actual Borders building. And if that's residential, that's a big building and whatever you would do with that. Where's the parking then? If we're already talking about kind of being concerned about parking now, and then you're going to add, I don't know, I'm not a developer, 20 more things, what do you do then?
So, great question. If we start pushing that building back off the sidewalk, right now I think we have right around, and I need to look at the map, 40 parking spots in the Borders building. Okay, so we have 15 units that we're proposing. Each one of those has 1 car garage. Let's say they have 2 cars though, right? So that means, you have 15 spots that you take up in the parking lot. Okay, and if we add housing to the Borders building, we need to retain those other 25 spots for that use like you're talking about.
Right.
Okay, that helps get all of the parking that we need in that parking lot, and don't add to the problem that, as KT put, that the city needs to fix the parking issue. We just don't want to add to the problem. And by designing it the way we did, we feel like we can accommodate all of our use.
I appreciate your answer. I think to me, that seems kind of the crux of the issue between your standpoint, and I'm not speaking for the other neighbors, but maybe they would agree or not. But to me, I think this is a cool project set back farther, where it just doesn't feel like this huge wall in front of us. But then that takes away your ability for parking and developing the other side. So it's just, I think I can see both sides to this, and I think that's a real challenge to it. I guess I'm just concerned that I've looked at that building be empty for quite a while, and I'm sure that's a tough sell. I'm not in that business, but I'm sure that's a tough sell. But it just seems, again, like I said, I don't have any experience in this world. Seems like we're just going to build a whole new building that's really tall and high, straight right on that sidewalk, while we just leave another building empty. I don't see how that's improving that whole lot of space. And then again, I'm purely talking from my point of view, looking out my front porch too. So, I appreciate everyone letting me speak about that. And I know there's a lot of angles to this, and I do want downtown to grow. I don't know how that works, but I appreciate everyone letting me say my thought.
And Commissioners, just want to add a little bit of perspective from my planning hat, not the historic resources hat, but there is a parking garage a block away from this proposed site. We have had a parking study done by the city, and that's online. You can look at that. And the capacity of that parking, right out here, the city parking garage is almost never at capacity.
Right.
There's a lot of parking there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we can talk about parking. I think we can talk about setbacks. Ultimately, if it's not what the applicant wants, they can come back to the HRC and say, we didn't work it out with ARC. And we have had that happen before with the project at 12th and Mass. They went through ARC and came up with a much better building, but when it got back to the Historic Resources Commission, the commission said, It's just too big. And they denied it. So that is an option that has happened in the past. So that's something else, just to keep in mind.
To add to that, though, there's been times when HRC denies it. That means the applicant can then appeal to the city commission, and the city commission can overrule and say, yep, go ahead. So there is that delicate balance where I would much rather work with the ARC and come up with compromises that does meet the guidelines, especially with an applicant that's willing to do that, than lose the ability to have a say, and they just appeal to the city commission and go forward with whatever they want.
Yeah.
I agree.
So can I try
Hey,
to?
Jeannie? Oh, go ahead.
So I was going to ask you if it's okay to make a motion?
Yes, please.
Okay. I move that we refer the project to the Architectural Review Committee for design refinement, specifically looking at fenestration, mass, the north-south elevation details, definitely increasing the variety and form, and having detailing that is more expressive of the historic references across the street on Rhode Island. Did I miss any details in that?
I'm just wondering if we got it all down.
Yep, we got
Okay. I second.
Thank you, Commissioner Buchanan and Commissioner Klein. We'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Buchanan,
Aye.
Commissioner Klein,
Commissioner Klein, aye.
Commissioner Cunningham,
Aye.
Chair Coleman is an aye, so that passes. We'll go to the ARC. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 2 of public agenda. I've lost my notes, apologies. Here it is, number HRC 250004.
This is also new construction on a vacant lot that has been vacant for some time now. This one is a little bit different though, because it is a state law review. The property is located in a National Register historic district. It is also located in an urban conservation overlay district that has specific design guidelines. So as we look at reviews on a continuum, state law review is the strictest review that this commission uses. This is the project location site. Here in the light blue is the property site or the subject property site. The striped area that you see here is the National Register Historic District. This is the project site, showing that this has been a grassy lot. Further to the right, which is a little bit off of this, is more parking. And then the wishing bench is here. This is looking down Delaware Street, back toward the Polar Building. Here's the Polar Building, and then the parking that has been there for some time now, and the vacant site. If you noticed in your packet, there was, again, the change over time for the Sanborn fire insurance maps. This property has had a little bit of history to it. When it was first included in the National Register nomination, it was included as significant open space. And then the property sold, and the new owner paid to have additional research done. And the Sanborn maps and the research that they did showed that there actually had historically been structure at this location. So it was changed. It is no longer a contributing site to the historic district. And then here's the wishing bench, which the applicant proposes to keep. This is the overall site plan showing the new construction of the apartment building down here on the far right-hand corner with the Polar building at the top of the screen, and then the 2- and 3-story buildings along Pennsylvania Street. This is a blow-up of that site plan. It does show that that curb cut that we looked at on the Google Street View goes away. There would be a curb cut down here on the far right of the screen. The majority of the parking would be accessed off of what is being maintained as an alley. You see these 17 spaces here, and then there's some parking along the north side of the structure as well. The structure is set back a little bit from the property line. It's comparable to other properties in the district. This is the east elevation of the structure. There's some good things about the project. Again, the architect has tried to break up the really heavy mass of this building by changing of materials and a little bit a change in plane to try to break down that overall mass of the structure. It is a very modern structure. It does have some brick to help it be more compatible with the historic district, but the proposed brick is white, and staff is of the opinion that that is not an appropriate material for the historic district, nor is the metal siding that's proposed. This is showing the west elevation of the structure, or the alley view, which you will be able to see part of this from Pennsylvania Street. Again, the mass is broken up by changing of materials. This shows the north and the south elevation, and unlike the building we just looked at, this has a little bit more design going on. There is a change in material, but there are also fenestration patterns that give some detailing, and it's not just a blank facade. One of the important things for staff, and you'll notice that in your staff report, is that when the design guidelines and the district were nominated and passed, the intent was for the Polar building to stay significant and to be the icon for the district, if you will, to be the structure that draws your eye or be the structure that calls your attention. With that in mind, when the design guidelines were done, they limited the height of new construction in the district to be less than the height of the Polar building. The applicant has actually shown in this streetscape that the structure is a little bit shorter than the Polar building, not a lot, and it is only a little bit taller than the addition that the Historic Resources Commission approved for the Lawrence Beer Company building. That's shown here in the middle. This, of course, is back across the alley. It's not in plane. If you'll notice, though, staff is of the opinion that this building may just be too tall. The majority of the buildings in the historic district are 2 stories, so that is something that staff would want the applicant and the ARC to look at. Are there options to reduce the height of this building in some way? The applicant has provided a rendering, and if you'll notice, there is brick and there is metal. Staff was of the opinion that a couple of things that could make the project better meet the Secretary of the Interior standards for compatibility, as well as those design guidelines it needs to meet, would be looking at the material choices, and also the fenestration pattern is very modern, even though the windows, the majority are taller than they are wide. They are punched openings with no architectural detailing. All of the buildings in the historic district have some type of architectural detailing to the building. I think the intent is good. It's meant to be a modern building, but it needs to be a little bit more compatible with the historic district, since this is a National Register Historic District. And one of the things that you look for in new construction with compatibility is the use of materials and how to make that conversation work so that the new construction doesn't take away from the historic buildings, and in this case particularly the Polar Building. And just wanted to put the Polar Building on the screen. If you'll notice, these windows in the center of the building were actually put in as part of the rehabilitation of this listed structure. And you'll notice while they are just punched in openings, they still have architectural detail to give some indication to historic patterns and historic uses of materials and design. The building it was a warehouse, so it doesn't have a whole lot of detailing, but if you notice on the ground floor, it really does have some nice detailing in the windows and the window hoods, and then with the limestone foundation. So there are architectural details on this building and then on some of the buildings along Pennsylvania Street that the project could take cues from those and incorporate them into their project to make the structure more appropriate for the historic district. So once again, staff is requesting that you refer the project to the Architectural Review Committee to allow for design refinement that will help the project better meet the standards and guidelines. And I'd be happy to stand for any questions you may have.
I don't have any questions.
Right, is the applicant present, and would they like to make a statement or a presentation?
Hey, Joy.
Hi, Connor.
Hey, everybody else. I'm Connor Trainer, CT Design. We're the architect for the project. I'm here for Tony Kresnick is out of town, but happy to answer any questions. We appreciate the recommendation to ARC, and happy to answer any questions.
I don't have questions, I guess, because again, I'm just looking at the aesthetics of the outside, and yes, indeed, it's modern, and as a historian, I just keep thinking in my head, that whole area is reverting back to its industrial roots. The buildings look industrial. Just thought I'd throw that out there.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question for you. Are you open to the building coming down one floor so that it's not competing with the Polar Lofts?
I don't have an architectural opinion on that, but this is an affordable housing project, and it's 45 affordable housing. Actually, it's not 45. It's 45 units, but I think only 32 of them maybe are affordable. So the building coming down a story, to me, architecturally, is insignificant, but it's just the amount of units that the project can sustain at that level.
So I do have some questions on the affordability. I noticed everything is one unit.
Yep, one
Would
bedroom.
it be possible to have certain sections of the building so we can kind of play with the height and massing of this, be a quad situation and still meet affordable housing guidelines?
I'm not
Or even like a double? So there's other apartment complexes that each unit is kind of rented, or each bedroom is rented separate. It's not so much the unit, it's the bedroom.
Oh, I see.
You see, so, and I don't know anything about affordable housing guidelines. I'm just trying to think of ways that you can reconfigure, keeping the affordable housing component and density, but be able to lower some of the height and strategic places. You see what I'm saying? So like, if we were able to do a quad, or even in corners, consolidate and still meet the affordable guidelines.
Yeah.
Commissioner Buchanan, I believe that Pat Watkins is on the line, and he said he can speak to this,
Okay.
if that's all right with Connor.
Absolutely.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you. This is Patrick Watkins. I'm an attorney here in town. I've been working with Tony on these projects for several years. And just to give you a little bit of context, this 8th and Penn redevelopment area has really become an incredible success story in the affordable housing world. It started with Polar Lofts, includes 9Del Lofts, New Hampshire Lofts, and now 9Del 2. Each of these is an affordable housing a project that is granted low-income housing tax credits at the state and federal level. To answer that question, Brenna, Commissioner Buchanan, there's something like the unit count, Connor, on this is all one bedrooms. We're trying to serve a very specific need. I think at architectural review, we could get into the details of some of how that layout could work. But this is all; these are all one bedrooms on the second, third, and fourth level. To give you some additional context, each one of these projects that I've referenced are Tony Kresnick's LIHTC projects, and in each one of them, I believe this is correct. And Lynn, you could correct me if I'm wrong. I think we've gone to architectural review on each of them, and at times started with a very wide impasse. Or a separation between what the design was and what eventually was agreed upon. But I think we can make up some ground there, and we can certainly explore, the variables with regard to this development. But you all are getting skilled at navigating competing interests here. The overwhelming competing interest on this project, much like most of Tony's projects, is that it will be conditioned upon a massive state and federal grant of low-income housing subsidy that will allow this project to offer tremendously low rents to the folks that qualify to live there. It is another deep cut into the affordability needs of the community. It's another potentially great project for this particular area. So that perhaps gives you a little bit of guidance. I think we all look forward to the opportunity to do an architectural review exercise on this project, but happy to stand for additional questions.
Going back to what Administrator Zollner suggested about playing with the materials. When I look at the photo here, I just want to make sure, the exterior image, I just want to make sure I'm understanding what I'm seeing in terms of materials. So the white is brick right now, is that what it is?
Yeah, it's correct.
Okay, and then, but is the red brick recessed on the wall of the apartments? Is that what's?
The red is metal.
The red is, so I'm seeing two different kinds of shades of metal. So that's what I'm asking. So what's the darker red in the back? That's metal?
Yeah, the recessed red bands are metal balcony railings.
Well, yeah, I got the metal balcony railings because they look like they have different little stripy shades on them, which I think is great. I'm trying to. So what's that?
This is metal. This is metal.
So the dark red is metal.
Yes.
Okay.
This is a balcony railing.
Right. Got that. Yeah. Okay. And then the white is brick. White brick. Okay. So my question is, could the white be red brick, and the recessed walls be white metal?
No, not metal. Metal does not meet the guidelines.
Okay, never mind. I'm just,
we're happy
if you want some, I'm just brainstorming, imagining things. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think, but I mean, in a more general answer to your question, nothing here is really set in stone. We're happy to look at different material options.
Yeah, well, that's part of, I was just trying to.
I think this is a common interaction between these projects in that area and the HRC, and it goes to ARC, and they bippity boppity boo and make some tremendous strides, getting it much closer to meeting.
Sure, no, I get it, I understand all that.
Yeah. So I think, they understand we have concerns with the materials and the fenestration and the detailing around those fenestrations. And I think the ARC, especially with Joy and Jay, they will work very well with you guys.
Right.
And we'll be pleased with what comes back.
Right. And I noticed too that LPA asked for, well, I think it was included in the staff report too, that and goes along with the National Register, that it should be subordinate to the Polar building, because the Polar is the granddaddy here. But okay, so and that's why that one image you had of the buildings kind of in a row showing your project would be slightly less tall than the Polar with the Lawrence Beer in between. I get that. I guess what, again, from an experiential viewpoint, when I drive down to that area, I'm always struck by seeing Theo Polar Mercantile, on the building, which, on the side of the building, which would have absolutely nothing to do with your project, correct? Because we would, because from your vantage point at your project, we're not seeing anything. So now my imagination is thinking, oh, so what industrial place was at that site, and what could be painted on the side, on north or south, what is it, the north or south side, that would announce, this used to be Lawrence Produce Company,
Yeah. That is a good point, Commissioner Klein. Is there a public art piece to this affordable housing project?
Tony has said he'd like there to be. We haven't exactly settled on what it is yet, but he likes to include them with most of his projects, and he'd like to do something here.
And I did want to verify with either you or Mr. Watkins that he has agreed to keep the wishing bench.
Yep.
Okay.
He's actually really excited about it.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. If there are no more questions for the applicant, I suggest we take public comment.
Thank you all. Very good to see you.
Thank you.
Katie, well, speaking only for myself, happy it's going to the ARC. And as to what was there before, there was a junkyard and there was an auto parts place, and you could go and play craps at night every Friday. So that could be on the side of the building.
Was it Greasy Hollow? Greasy Hollow?
Hollow, yeah.
It was Greasy Hollow?
Yeah.
We thought the white brick looked like dice. I'm just kidding.
Oh, yeah. I know.
I do have one question for staff as far as reconciling number 3, where the standards say, it should be half the height of what's proposed, but because it's affordable housing, it's being allowed to go 4 stories instead of 2. Does
That is not for this property. That amendment to the guidelines was done specifically for the affordable housing project that is at 8th in Pennsylvania.
okay? Interesting. Okay.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
I move that we refer the project to the Architectural Review Committee to allow for design refinement, specifically the materials, fenestration, scale and mass, for sure. Am I missing anything? Fenestration details?
Height.
Yeah.
Yeah, height,
fenestration.
mass, yeah.
I second that motion.
Okay, thank you for the motion and the second. We'll take a vote now. Commissioner Buchanan,
Aye.
Commissioner Klein,
Commissioner Klein, aye.
Commissioner Cunningham,
Aye.
and Chair Coleman is an aye. We'll see you in Architectural Review Committee. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, back to the agenda. We've completed our public hearing items. Are there any miscellaneous items today?
The only miscellaneous item I have is, I hope you noticed in the paper, it was in the paper, and then there was a city news announcement done about it, but the signs, and there you go, Kurt is the magic behind the curtain. The signs were installed that you approved earlier this year, and they look really good, so if you haven't been out to the park, take your life in your hands, cross the street, and go see the new signs.
Thank you. I had one miscellaneous item. The Douglas County Commission is hosting an open house in the Commission Chamber, newly restored Commission Chamber, at the end of the month on Final Fridays.
Nice. Okay. And I guess I have one miscellaneous. There's 8 minutes to play, and the score is 57-51 Arkansas.
Okay, well, we better adjourn the meeting and get to that.
Okay.
Where's my bracket already?
Thank you. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.